June 6, 1944. The day history held its breath. Thousands of Allied soldiers stormed the beaches of Normandy into a wall of German lead. It was the largest seaborne invasion in human history. But while the world's eyes were fixed on the blood-soaked sands of Omaha and Utah Beach, something impossible was happening just 30 miles away. German intelligence was panicking. Their aerial scouts reported a massive American force, the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops, moving toward a different sector. Thousands of tanks, heavy artillery, and the unmistakable roar of an army preparing for total war. Hitler's generals were convinced. They diverted their panzer divisions, waiting for a blow that would never land. Because those tanks? They were filled with air. Those soldiers? They were artists from New York. And that roar of engines? It was coming from a record player. What if the most dangerous weapon in World War II wasn't a bomb, but a lie? A lie so perfectly crafted that it fooled the greatest military minds of the Third Reich. Today, we uncover the shadows of the Ghost Army. In early 1942, the U.S. Army realized they needed more than just muscle to win a war across the Atlantic. They needed deception. They formed a top-secret unit, the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops. But they didn't go to West Point to find their leaders. They went to the Pratt Institute, Yale, and the Art Students League of New York. Imagine being a young art student like Bill Blass, who would later dominate the world of fashion, or Ellsworth Kelly, a man who would become one of America's greatest painters. One day you're sketching charcoal portraits, and the next, you're recruited by Colonel Billy Harris for a mission so secret you couldn't even tell your parents. The Army wasn't looking for snipers. They were looking for men who understood forced perspective, men who knew how shadows worked. They needed people who could look at a piece of rubber and see a 30-ton Sherman tank. These 1,100 men were about to become the most unique unit in military history. They weren't trained to kill the enemy, they were trained to be a target. To pull off a scam this big, the Ghost Army relied on 3 pillars: visual, sonic, and radio deception. Let's look at the visual first. These weren't just balloons. They were high-grade pneumatic decoys. From 500 feet in the air, a rubber tank looked identical to steel. But the artists took it further. They would use bulldozers to create fake tank tracks leading up to the decoys, because they knew German scouts looked for tracks as proof of movement. Then came the sound. This was the cutting edge of 1940s technology. Engineers at Bell Labs recorded the sounds of tanks, trucks, and bridge building onto massive wire recorders. These sounds were then played through 500-pound speakers mounted on the back of half-tracks. On a cold night in France, these speakers could project the sound of a massive army moving 15 miles away. To a German sentry in the woods, it sounded like the end of the world was coming for him. And finally, the spoof radio. The Germans were masters at traffic analysis. They could identify an American radio operator just by the way he tapped his Morse code. So, the Ghost Army operators learned to mimic the handwriting of real divisional operators. They created a digital ghost world, convincing Nazi listeners that entire divisions were where they weren't. September 1944. General George S. Patton's Third Army was moving fast, but his lines were stretched thin. A 75-mile gap had opened up near Bettemburg, Luxembourg. If the Germans realized how weak the line was, they could have counterattacked and cut Patton's army in half. The Ghost Army was sent in. For 8 days, 1,100 men pretended to be the 6th Armored Division. They set up hundreds of inflatable tanks. They played the sounds of heavy movement every night. They moved their few real trucks back and forth to create dust clouds. This was the ultimate gamble. These artists had no real tanks, no heavy artillery. If a single German patrol had stumbled into their camp, the secret would have been out, and the massacre would have been total. But the Germans stayed back. They were so convinced they were facing a massive force that they never took the shot. The Ghost Army held the line, with nothing but air and noise. But the deception didn't stop at the battlefield. The Ghost Army practiced what they called atmosphere. When they arrived in a French town, they would wear the shoulder patches of famous divisions like the 75th or the 2nd Armored. They would walk into local cafes, knowing that German spies were likely hiding in the corners. They would sit down, order a drink, and accidentally let slip that their division was moving north. They would drive trucks through the town square over and over again, each time with a different bumper marking, to make it look like a never-ending